So thank you everyone for coming out. I'd like to thank Changwu Fashi and everyone at Vancouver Dharma Drum um, for inviting me to share on this topic, which I think is very important. But it's often, at least in my experience, it's often not talked about in Buddhism and in Buddhist daily life practice. So today's topic of deep listening and communication, I'd like to share first about, in general, what is it that the Dharma teaches us? And this is referring to, of course, the Dharma or the instructions of the Buddhist tradition. What it does teach us about communication. I'd also like to talk about what is lacking in the Buddhist tradition with regards to communication. What is missing? And then from there, I'd actually like to talk about a kind of a how-to approach, how to really communicate deeply and present steps or present skills that you can use immediately. Immediately meaning in any conversation or in any challenging situation where communication is often difficult. So, I hope to really present concrete methods and practices for communication. And then finally, I'd like to relate how deep communication can also be developed within the traditional approach to meditation. How can we develop or strengthen our capacity for deep communication by practicing sitting meditation, by practicing in silence, alone. Okay. Maybe some of you have some questions already in your mind about this topic. Well, we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. So during the talk, just if a question comes up, just hold on to it, write it down, and we'll try to address it instead of kind of interrupting the flow of the talk. Okay. And if it's convenient, I mean, I think it is more convenient at home to take notes. Whether or not you have the habit of taking notes during a Dharma talk, even just very basic notes can help you retain the information and then be able to kind of have this this guidebook to communication. Okay, so feel free to take notes. It can be helpful. So first, what does the Dharma, what does traditional Buddhist teaching and Buddhist culture teach us about communication? Well, first of all, I think the strongest part of Buddhist teaching is that it can train us to deeply know ourselves. And one of the ways we do that is through meditation, right? In meditation, it's developing our capacity to be calm, to have a stable mind, and it's developing clarity. Clarity meaning an awareness of our experience, clarity or awareness of what's the condition of our body, what's the condition of our feelings, what's the condition of our thoughts and ideas, what's our experience in the present moment. This is the strong point of Buddha Dharma, helping us to truly know ourselves and to not only know that the content, not only know what is it we're experiencing, but to know the nature of what we're experiencing, the nature of our body, our mind, and the environment as something that's changing, as something that's completely integrated, ourself and the world as an integrated whole. This helps us to develop wisdom, the ability to be aware, yet at the same time, we could say liberated from our pain, or liberated from our psychological pain and struggles, even in the midst of physical pain, even in the midst of something unpleasant. The Dharma teaches us how to be liberated within our own experience of self and world. But the Dharma also teaches us how to engage with the world, right? And a lot of this is covered in the Buddhist precepts. And it's also covered in the basic the basic eightfold path, the Bajang Dao, right? All Buddhist traditions talk about the eightfold path, which, with regards to communication, we have right speech, right? Right action, which includes interaction with others, right livelihood, how to maintain a healthy lifestyle, a lifestyle that doesn't create harm. So right speech, right action, right livelihood, in a sense, these things involve our engagement with the world, with others. And there's communication there. However, the teachings in the Dharma are very general. It's not very specific on how to engage, just very general principles of avoiding harm, right? Doing what is good or wholesome, helpful, and clearing our mind, or purifying our mind, clearing it of these psychological afflictions and problems that we have. So the Dharma teaches generally about engaging with the world in a wholesome way, in a beneficial way. So that includes communication. But for the most part, the detailed teachings of the Dharma have to do with more of an inner communication, or an inner observation of self and world. And as we know, that's often done in silence, in meditation. Deep observation, is often, it's a personal thing. However, another way where there can be communication in silence is actually when people practice together, right? So the Buddhist retreat, meditation retreat, is one context where people are, for the most part, in silence. I think many of you have been to, 7 days or even 10 days or 49 days of silence, and you're living with other people. Nobody's saying anything to each other. Well, hopefully, besides the ones who are sneaking around and chatting. And then there's the opportunity to speak with a teacher, but it's very brief, a more discussion about the practice itself, the technical side of practice. For the most part, it's silent. But many people may experience that even in silence, there's like a connection that we can make with people, right? Just by being there with others, sharing a space in silence, there's a deep connection there. So that is also communication. In the Chan tradition, the Chan school, there's often this emphasis as well on kind of wordless communication, right? 不立文字, like not relying on words or language to have this communication, or to have a recognition of each other's state of being. So for example, when a Chan master is observing or engaging with a student, often the deepest observations are made just by being present with each other. And a person can recognize another person's kind of way of being just by being present. There's no need for words. It could all be in silence. But of course, there is also speaking, engagement, communication between teacher and student. And we read stories about this, and they're very often interesting stories, especially within the Chan school. But again, there's no instruction on how to deeply communicate. In the Chan tradition, it's often more spontaneous, just comes about naturally through a person taking care of their individual practice, taking care of their own body and mind. It's like deep communication is then spontaneous, kind of sudden. So we don't find teachings there, but yes, there's communication in silence and just in spontaneous being. But I think what's lacking in the Buddhist tradition is that there are no explicit, detailed instructions on how to really communicate. Maybe I've missed something. I mean, I haven't read everything there is to read of the Buddhist tradition, and I can't speak for every single tradition and every single Buddhist community. But just from what I've observed over the years and from contacting different communities of Buddhists, both monastic and lay, there's a lacking of training in communication in terms of speaking and listening and really connecting deeply with others on that level. If you look in the monastic teachings, though, in the monastic tradition and the precepts in particular, there are instructions on when and how to communicate or to resolve, how to resolve conflicts within the monastic community, how to resolve issues of monastics and their behavior, through meetings of the Sangha. But again, these are very general. They're good. They establish a principle of the need for communication, but it's very general. And even teachers, Buddhist teachers, including myself, monastic teachers, lay teachers, from what I've seen and experienced, there was also very little training on how to communicate, how to have a more of a reciprocal, a back and forth connection or communication. And what do I mean by that? Well, Buddhist teachers are taught how to speak, how to give Dharma talks, how to give instructions on meditation, and in a way, trained on how to give advice, using the principles of the Dharma, using the methods of the practice, and kind of giving advice on how someone can practice themselves. And that's what Buddhist teachers are mostly trained in. Buddhist teachers are traditionally not trained in how to actually counsel someone, how to meet a person where they're at and be there for them and provide counsel, which means not just giving advice, but even empowering the person to find their own problems and answers. That's how I see counseling. Counseling is, whether it's in the professional field of counseling or not, to counsel is actually to empower someone to find their own problems and answers. So, traditionally Buddhist teachers we're just not taught that. However, there is some traditions that I've seen they're doing a great job. Just for example, the Thich Nhat Hanh in his community, he's developed very detailed instructions on how to communicate, which I think is wonderful, using Buddhist principles to help practitioners communicate with each other on a very deep level. I also hope, and maybe it's already begun in the Dharma drum lineage, but I hope that it can be done. More training and instruction in deep communication. I think now, because of the dialogue between Western, or say Western psychology-based counseling and more of the Eastern spiritual traditions, including Buddhism, as they communicate more and dialogue, the skills of communication can be used by Buddhist communities and practitioners. So that's my hope. So what do we do if we're trained as Buddhists, but we're not trained so well in communication? How do we go about this? Can we do it spontaneously? Can we just take care of our own practice and meditate a lot and be calm and just spontaneously have the wisdom to communicate well? Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it can really help if we have more concrete guidance. So, when words are necessary, when communication with speech and listening is necessary, when there are conflicts that we can't just resolve spontaneously. For example, our teacher, Master Shengyan, would say, to when we have vexations, when we have troubles, not to kind of pour them out on other people and just talk and tell everyone about our problems and then feel better, but actually to, in a way, dissolve these troubles within our own heart, which is great. That's important. We don't want to dump our troubles on other people. He would also say that if we're on the other side, the side of the person listening, that we can practice being like a bottomless garbage can, 无底垃圾桶, where if people are dumping their stuff on us, we can use our practice just to let it not collect in ourselves, not to collect in us like a garbage can with a bottom, but a bottomless garbage can. So whatever someone says, it doesn't stick to us, and our self or our mind is not stained by it or tainted by it. So that's great. That's how the practice can help us in communication. But when we really need to speak and communicate, when there are conflicts that need deeper communication, especially when we hurt people intentionally or not, especially the people close to us, maybe we have the most conflicts with the people closest to us, the people that we truly love, are dearest to us. Is it possible that a lot of our conflicts are here? Can we just meditate everything away? I don't think so. And I'm sure, all of you face challenges in your professional life, in your careers, and, how to communicate with these people in these challenging situations. So since the traditional Dharma teachings may be lacking this area, and since the profession of counseling, which I'm trained in and I see provides such wonderful skills of communication, I think that we can combine the attitude of practice, the attitude of Buddhist practice, with these, they're often called micro skills of counseling, to develop a wiser, deeper way of communicating. And if we were to say, okay, well, what is the general attitude of Buddhist practice? Well, I think it's safe to say that the general attitude of Buddhist practice is selflessness, or not being self-centered, but being compassionate. Not being self-centered, not being other-centered either, and just kind of ignoring ourselves and only caring about others. That's not very compassionate. But equally caring for self and others. We could say it's selflessness. So we can consider everyone's benefit. If we approach communication with the attitude of, let's consider the benefit of everyone, instead of kind of just being obsessed with our own stuff, if we approach communication just with the idea of, I want to get what I want, I want to make sure I don't lose what I want to keep, the communication will probably falter. It's a very self-centered approach to communicating. So we want to consider everyone's benefit as we approach communication. We want to minimize the harm, maximize the benefit for everyone. The second aspect we could say is we want to consider people's thoughts and feelings. Sentient beings, beings with feeling, beings with emotion. We're all very sensitive, right? Just one word can create a sense of pain in a person. One word and how it's said. So we want to consider everyone's feelings, consider that sentient beings, emotional beings, are sensitive and fragile. So if we consider everyone's feelings, we'll be more careful when we communicate. And if we consider everyone's ideas, temporarily not consider right and wrong, right? We often approach communication with who's right and who's wrong. We want to clear it up. That can also create obstacles for communication. But if we just consider everyone's ideas, be respectful for everyone's ideas, no matter what they are, this creates a space where people feel comfortable because they feel respected. They don't feel attacked because someone thinks they're wrong or we think they're wrong. We feel safe because ideas are respected as well. So the attitude of selflessness of Buddha Dharma, considering everyone's benefit, considering everyone's thoughts and feelings. If we approach communication in this way, we have openness. We have room for communication. If we approach things with just wanting to win, wanting to be right, that's big trouble. That's big trouble. Immediately, there's a wall there. Self-attachment creates a wall and a barrier for communication. So this is the attitude of Buddhist practice that we could bring to communication. Next, I'd like to talk about what's often referred to in the counseling field as micro skills, which are just skills of communication, but more detailed techniques on how to engage in a way that really fosters deep communication. So these micro skills can be applied to basically any situation where we're communicating. It could be a big conflict, or it could just be a conversation, right? Deep communication is not only for when there's a big problem. Deep communication is a way of communicating that can even enrich our conversations. And I think you'll see how. But let's use one context. Let's say there is a conflict, so that when I'm presenting these micro skills, there's more of a clear context. Let's say there's a conflict, and we need to approach this conflict. What are some of these micro skills, and how can we use them? Number one, and by the way, this list of micro skills is in no way like complete or extensive. Micro skills could be infinite in a way. There could be 84,000 micro skills, especially if Buddhists are using them. Many different approaches, but I've kind of listed 9, and I'll address 9 of them. So the first one is showing respect for personal space. And in one word, boundaries. So what does that mean? Well, we want to make sure that people are ready to communicate. Maybe we want to talk about something. Maybe we want to address this conflict, but maybe the other person isn't ready. So we want to make sure that they are ready. We want to respect their space and their boundary. So maybe they need to cool off, right? So if we just had an argument or this big conflict and everyone's emotionally kind of shaken, is this a good time to start a conversation, deep communication? Probably not. So what we can do is actually just first observe the person, from a distance, take a look. Are they still breathing heavy? Are they still fuming, so to speak? Or have they calmed down? If they're still banging things, walking heavy, huffing and puffing, I think, these are physical signs that we should just wait a bit. Wait before we approach them to talk. Also, we can observe, are we settled yet? Have we cooled down? Or are our emotions still quite agitated, but we really want to take care of this? We may feel even like afraid of the conflict getting worse. So we just want to rush into it and take care of it. And we forget about everybody's space and boundary. That's a problem. So we can observe ourselves. Are we in a calm state, ready for deep and sometimes difficult communication? So we want to make sure that both sides, both parties, let's not say sides, but let's say everyone involved is ready to sit down and communicate. So that's personal space and boundary, respecting boundaries. This is one aspect of boundaries. Boundaries can be applied in many ways, and we can talk about that in just a bit. When we approach a person, how do we do it? Sometimes we want to communicate because we have our own agenda, right? We have something we want to get done with this communication. And maybe that's the first thing in our mind. We may think, I just want to make sure this person understands me. I want to make sure they know I didn't do that on purpose. I just want to make sure we're okay. We may be driven by a self-centered motivation to, fulfill our agenda. So we have to be careful about that, because coming into a conversation with this self-centered motivation, people can feel it. It's almost like if a person's sensitive, they can feel just this wave of 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 self or of uh, our agenda, and they're just like, okay, they put up a wall. We can instead, and this is number 2, we can instead first show concern. Show concern for them and approach them. I'm sorry, I also left something out. Before we approach the topic, just going back to the boundary, to ask them, not just to observe, but to ask the person, is now a good time to talk? Can we talk? Give them a chance to say yes or no. If they say no, to respect it. If they say yes, then we can continue. So number 2 would be then to show concern. For the first thing that we can do is actually take care of everyone's feelings. Before we start to take care of business, maybe some of you have learned this skill. When you start a meeting, take care of everyone's feelings first. Take care of the atmosphere. Take care of, ask how everyone's doing. In a conflict situation, especially, to say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Show concern for them. This immediately can change the atmosphere and help someone feel at ease, because they know that we're approaching this communication with concern for them. It's not just about our agenda. It's about we're concerned for them, concerned about their feelings. As Buddhists, and I've made this mistake many times as a teacher in a teacher situation, kind of disregarding someone's feelings and just thinking, well, why are you so attached? Just use the method. Just practice already. Of disregarding their feeling and just expecting that they should, you know, recite the Buddha's name, or, just silently illuminate and feel fine. You know, uh, I had I'd say a fault of being a little too cold when approaching people during conflict. I forgot about feelings. I was probably also forgetting about my own feelings. So showing concern for someone's feelings creates a sense of safety. And when we do that, we'll probably feel more safe and relaxed ourselves. We're not going in for the attack. We're going in to heal. Um, and in doing that, this leads to number 3, which is inviting them to speak, inviting them to speak first. Instead of just saying, "Are you okay?" and then, "Oh, you're okay? Okay. So here's what I want to tell you. I just blah blah blah." Right? This is self-centeredness. This is considering one's own agenda and just pouring it on someone. We can invite them to speak first instead of rushing to explain ourselves or rushing to give advice. Invite them to speak and hear them out. We can say, um, so, did you want to share with me what you're thinking, or how you feel? Do you want to share? And maybe they say no. Maybe they want us to speak first, which is okay. But we're first giving them the space um, to share. It's actually giving everyone involved the space to share. Um, and when they share, we can we can for example, they speak what's on their mind, and they've finished an idea, or they finished a thought. Do we just kind of like jump in and then tell our thoughts? It's like, okay, that's cool, but let me tell you what I was thinking. We may quickly disregard what was just said, or jump to kind of continue the discussion. What we could do is reflect their ideas and reflect their feelings. And reflect means actually to say it back. So for example, we could say, oh, so what you're saying is you were actually upset about that. Okay, I hear you. Or, oh, so you were actually thinking this? Okay, I didn't know that. Now I know this is what you're thinking. So this is reflecting, letting them know we heard them. And by saying it, not just by saying, uh-huh, or not just with a silent, plain, gaze, but verbalizing it. So reflect their ideas, reflecting feelings. This is so powerful. This micro skill is so powerful because it helps the person feel heard. They feel and they know that they've been heard. It's not that they just got a chance to talk and say it, but that it was heard. And that's very powerful. Sometimes a conflict can be resolved just with those steps. Once they feel heard, they're like, okay, actually, I'm not that upset. Or it's not that bad, because we heard them. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes after reflecting, not to again rush to our own stuff, not to rush to speak our own mind, but we can ask more questions. If we haven't really got the complete a complete understanding of what they think and feel, then we can ask questions based on what they said. This sounds so simple, but actually, sometimes we don't ask questions and we assume. We just say, "Oh, yeah, I get it. You felt this." But we may not really have a clear picture. We may need to ask more questions and clarify more deeply. Sometimes that may even be uncomfortable for some people. Like for myself, in the past, I was sort of not sure if I should ask questions. I felt like, geez, asking questions, it's almost like, intruding on someone's brain or intruding on someone's feelings. But actually, asking questions, we can clarify, we can understand more deeply. And we can also ask questions, like if we're not sure we should ask this question, or we're not sure the person's comfortable, we can ask, are you comfortable saying some more about this? I really want to know. Are you comfortable talking about it? Give them the option. This creates even more of a feeling of a safe space to communicate. And then, after we've heard them, after they've spoken, and we've given them plenty of time and space to speak, we've given ourselves time and space to understand, we can summarize what we've heard. Say, okay, now I get it. So this is what was happening. This is what you were thinking. This is what you were feeling. I get it. Now I understand. The fourth, the fourth approach we can say is to give space, to give even more space by being silent, actually. Again, not hurrying to get our own ideas across once we've heard them out, but just allow for some space, allow for some silence. A silence can help us really absorb what we've just heard, and can allow the other person to also continue to process internally. Maybe they have something more to say, but they just didn't have the space yet. They were still kind of thinking out loud or working their way through what they want to say, what they want to express. Maybe they need more space, so we can just be silent. Just sit there. And, maybe sometimes some people feel that's awkward, especially with conversation, awkward silence. But it doesn't have to be awkward. It can be a comfortable silence if we can train ourselves in it. We can be comfortable and relaxed in silence. Um, and, one way to do that is we don't have to just stare at the person, in silence, just, bugging our eyes and staring. That can make the person feel uncomfortable, but we can release and relax our gaze. And we can look away. You can relax the gaze and relax the engagement of eye contact, and even turning away, turning to the side. A person would feel less of this pressure to say something, and they feel there's more space to just sit and allow something to come into their mind. So giving space is also another very powerful approach, allowing everyone to absorb and process what's communicated or what may need to be verbalized. Afterwards, we can then respond. Now that we've given a chance of the other person to speak, to express themselves, we've given enough space, we can first respond, yet respond to what they've communicated, not just to jump to our own idea again, but to respond to what was said. So say, based on what I heard, you just say, based on what you were thinking and feeling, um, blah, blah, blah. Address what was said. And this is often the place where we can actually take responsibility for some of the harm that we've done. This is another step in kind of creating space and also healing some pain there that can be a wall for communication. And by recognizing and admitting our responsibility and our fault, we can address what they said and say, I didn't realize that's how you felt. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for doing that. Really sorry for saying that. I didn't want to hurt you. I'm really concerned about you. I don't want to hurt you. So I'm very sorry for that. Um, right there is a moment, an opportunity for some healing, for some reconciliation between those involved. Um, this can make everyone more receptive for our ideas to then be shared. As you can say, we're already at step 6. Step 6 is then we can share our ideas, meaning share our agenda, but after we've done those other very important steps of caring for the other. Here we can share, okay, well, this is what I was thinking. This is what I was feeling. Um, just share our own thoughts and feelings. And this is something interesting as well. Within the Buddhist tradition, we talk a lot about being uh, being directly aware of thoughts and feelings, within ourselves, right? So in meditation, we're actually practicing being sincere with ourselves and not hiding from our own thoughts and feelings and experience, but just being present with it. But what I noticed is not often done is it's not so encouraged to verbalize how we think and feel. And maybe this is something in particular with more traditional Chinese Buddhist communities. I think culturally, we need to acknowledge there's also culture mixed in with the Buddhist tradition. Different cultures are different, but in my experience, it wasn't very common to talk about feelings. How do you feel necessarily? It's more talk about business, talk about what needs to be done, talk about uh, the practice, talk about the work. Um, and it may seem like, wasn't it self-centered to always be focusing on your own feelings and telling people how you feel? Hey, I feel this. I don't feel happy. I don't feel happy. you know, I don't think this is fair. I don't feel happy. Complaining is one thing, right? Being self-centered and only thinking about our own feelings, that's a problem. That's suffering. But verbalizing how we feel to somebody else in an appropriate way, not complaining, just expressing sincerely, this can really this really deepens the communication between both people, because uh, both people or everyone involved is opening up. The term being vulnerable is used in the counseling field. Being vulnerable is appropriately sharing our feelings and thoughts. not just running at the mouth and telling everybody how we feel all the time. That can be a nuisance and a problem. But appropriately sharing, verbalizing what we feel and what we think uh, deepens the connection between people, because everyone's opening up, and everyone feels safe to really share their experience, to really sincerely express their experience. But to be wise about it, to have wisdom, it's also important to recognize that, okay, this is what we were thinking and feeling, but maybe our thinking is not so accurate. No? It's okay to acknowledge what we were thinking, but maybe it's not accurate. Maybe we didn't see things clearly. Maybe we perceived things. We misperceived things. So for example, we often think that somebody is mad at us, for example, or we think we know how someone feels, or we think we know what's best for someone. This is a common thing. We think we know what's best for other people. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe that's our misperception. So we can express it. We can express, well, I think this is best for you. In my opinion, because of such and such, this is what I think. I think this may be best for you. Yet we can acknowledge, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not the best for you. This is a more selfless approach to expressing our perceptions, acknowledging that they may not be accurate. So we're much less attached, much less insistent on our views. Afterwards, number 7, we can invite them to respond, because maybe the other person is not so active, or not so assertive. Maybe they just agree, they nod their head, they say, yes, okay, I understand. We may need to invite them to respond and say, so what do you think about what I just said? Or what do you feel after I just said that? Inviting the other person again, making this dialogue a real dialogue, reciprocal. And then it continues, we kind of use the above methods and approaches, it continues. But what if our emotions again get agitated? Because it's very likely, especially with a conflict. What do we do at that point? Everything was nice and fine. It seemed like everyone was calm. Things seemed to be, getting repaired as reconciliation. But then something came up again, and all of a sudden, it seems that safety and that space is now a little unsafe. We're both getting agitated. What do we do? So number 8, this is another kind of boundary to be aware of. If, let's say, if the other person we're speaking with is getting very emotionally agitated and yelling, shouting, not just once or twice, but kind of continuously yelling, shouting, agitated in a way which is not at all constructive. Sometimes allowing someone to yell and shout, it's like, it's okay, they get it out, it passes. Sometimes it just recycles and they continue to shout. They continue to yell. They may even be physically aggressive and bang the table or damage material things. And of course, it's a dangerous situation if they get physically violent. We need to create a boundary to make sure that this doesn't continue. We don't want to just, we don't want to just think, well, let me just sit here calmly without saying anything while they yell and scream and break the dishes. We don't just sit there and, practice being selfless or practice being passive because we're allowing harm to be done. So at this point, creating a boundary is important. Creating a boundary meaning we need to express clearly that if this person continues like this, we're not going to continue the communication. We're going to stop here. This is very important. This is stopping harm. One of the principles of Buddhism that I mentioned earlier, stopping harm. It's not only ourself that we stop doing harm, but in a certain situation, we need to stop others from harming. So we can clearly express that. If you keep doing this, we're stopping. I'm leaving. I'm leaving this moment of communication. We can talk another time, but if you continue in this way, we're going to end it here. I'll come back, when you're ready. And for ourselves, it's the same. If we notice ourselves losing control of our emotion and our communication then becomes in a way violent or aggressive, we start shouting, we start just speaking in ways which is harming, we need to create that boundary and stop ourselves and say, I'm really sorry. I'm so emotional right now. I can't talk about this. I can't talk about this right now. I'm sorry. Let's set another time. We'll try this again. Or let me just take a walk. We need to create that boundary to prevent harm. Sometimes it's not that extreme. Like we don't need to totally stop the conversation, but we can also acknowledge how we feel to create a boundary. Acknowledge and verbalize our experience. Again, this is not selfish to talk about how we feel. It's actually fostering communication. So for example, if the way someone is talking, they may be attacking us or using speech in a way which we feel attacked, we can express that. We can just say, hey, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to listen to this because I feel attacked. This kind of technique is often used within a system called nonviolent communication. Have you folks heard of that or used that? Expressing that we feel a certain way to then guide the communication. I'm sorry, I feel attacked right now. I it's hard for me to listen to this. Or I feel really hurt right now. Can we just take a pause? I feel pretty hurt. I just need a little bit of silence. Creating a boundary by verbalizing how we feel then can allow the person to adjust themselves. They may realize it and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I was doing it again. I'm sorry. Let me try that again. So this is another way of creating boundary by expressing how we feel, expressing our experience to then foster more communication. So with all of these approaches and micro skills, we can really enrich our capacity to communicate in conflicting situations. And we can even use these skills in conversation as well to enrich, how we connect with others. If you feel that with your conversations with people, it's like, I feel like I don't know how to connect. Maybe it's because you are missing some of these skills. Maybe it's because you were kind of closed mentally, and some of these skills can help you to open up and really connect. But there is a final skill or approach that I'll share tonight, which is just to express gratitude. To kind of close the communication or to have closure to a dialogue. We can just express gratitude and say, how thankful we are for the other person sharing, how thankful we are for the other person listening, and just say, I really appreciate you taking the time to share what's on your mind. It really helps me to understand you. Or I really appreciate that you gave me a chance to speak. It makes me feel so much more relieved to be able to share myself, and to know that you heard me. You know, expressing gratitude is kind of this wholesome way to nourish, to conclude the dialogue, and to kind of nourish the connection between people, so that there's more motivation to communicate in the future, right? When people know that the communication was fruitful, when we verbalize that it was fruitful, then they know. If we don't verbalize and we just sit there and we kind of finish like, they may wonder. It's like, okay, so did this work? Did what we just said, and did this work? We can give everyone confidence by expressing gratitude and expressing, how did this work? And giving feedback. So these are a few skills and approaches that we can apply to communication. To conclude, I'd just like to again relate this back to the more formal practices of meditation, the ones that we're very familiar with, and that we're trained in. How can meditation, especially sitting meditation or silent meditation, how can it help us to develop and deepen our ability to communicate? And I'll use the method of silent illumination as a way to illustrate this, because I think just the way that silent illumination is expressed as a method, just works so well in the context of communication. So silent illumination, or the Chinese is 默照, silence refers to the mind being stable, undisturbed, and we could say silent because there are lesser or even no distracting thoughts, or there's no noise of thought and thinking burdening the mind. It doesn't mean we can't think, but it means the mind is now unburdened of the constant noise that's experienced when our mind is untrained. We just have all these thoughts all the time, constant noise, constant thinking, which leads to emotional disturbance. Silence means that the noise of the mind, the noise of thought and emotion has calmed. Illumination means we're just very clear with what we're faced with. Internally, our physical body, feelings, thoughts, and externally, what we see, hear, touch, contact, it's all clear. We're present to it. When we develop these qualities of silence and illumination, or silence and clarity, we actually have the ability to really listen, well to others. Because if we have a noisy mind, what are we really hearing? We may be actually getting totally distracted, not even listening to what the person's saying, and we're engaging in our own thoughts, preparing to say something, preparing to react, or just even daydreaming. We may be bored with what they're saying. If our mind is silent, we're just present. We see the person. We hear the person. We fully hear not only what they're saying, but we can even more clearly experience the person, experience the presence of the other person. What is their state of body and mind? We can see it. We can see if they're agitated by their body. We can even hear or feel their 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 state more clearly if we're sensitive because of this silence of our own mind. We just get a better sense of where the other person is at, and we can uh, listen very deeply. It doesn't mean that we can read people's minds necessarily, and we still need to often ask questions, but still we have this presence that we can listen very clearly and deeply. Also, because we have this silence, because the mind is not spitting out constant thought and thinking and noise, um, the momentum of our self-centered thinking is greatly reduced. So we're less likely to kind of be impulsively talking about what we want to talk about. But let me just say what I want to say. Let me finish. We're often impulsively speaking and pouring out our mind to people because of our attachment to our thoughts and feelings. If our mind is silent, that momentum is also greatly weakened, so that when it's our turn, we can speak. When it's the right time to share something, we can share it. It's no longer impulsive. It's no longer driven by self-centeredness. Also, when we have a more stable and silent mind, when we engage with someone, when they become agitated, or when they share something which is potentially triggering or potentially hard for us to hear, we're more able to be with it. We're more able to not be disturbed by it. Even if we are bothered by it, we're able to then absorb it and relax into ourselves. And we recognize, okay, now I'm feeling a little bit agitated. Let's relax again. We're able to absorb and contain our own reactivity. This is the power of a stable, silent mind. And like what I mentioned before, we're also comfortable with silence, the absence of speech in times of communication. With a silent mind, when people stop talking and there's just this silent space, we're okay with it already, because we're accustomed to a mind that is quiet. It doesn't need to be filled with speech and noise to be comfortable. We're comfortable already because of cultivating a silent, stable mind. And finally, because of that silence and clarity, we respond from a place of non-self, or we respond from a less self-centered place. Self-centered responses are reactive. We don't like something, we just react. We say something. Or if we really like something, we're also driven to say something. We're driven to put our own ideas into things. If the mind is silent and clear, we can respond much more appropriately. What needs to be said now? Or when is silence appropriate? We will know. Which skill should I use? We will know. We don't necessarily have to think about the list and let's see, which skill should I use this one? If our mind is silent and clear, we know. We have a better awareness of what response is needed. And we respond to the needs of everyone. Again, this is the selfless attitude of Buddhist practice. We are aware of and we respond to the needs of everyone. We're not blinded by what I want, what I think, what I feel, what I like, what I don't like. Silence and illumination, the method of silent illumination, allows us to cultivate this silence, open, skillful way of responding within this context of communication. Okay, so I think for today, this is what I'd like to share with everyone, what I'd like to present. You know, the supportive things of Buddhist teachings that already nourish communication, to address what's lacking within Buddhist practice, and then to use some skills to combine with the Buddhist attitude, the attitude of practice, the selfless attitude, combined with communication skills, can help us to really communicate more deeply with people on uh, in the context of conflict, but also just on an everyday level, on an everyday um, context of communication, conversation, daily engagement. So this is what I know so far. Again, it's not exhaustive. Hopefully, it was helpful. This is my experience in how to really communicate deeply, heart to heart with ourselves and others. So I'll finish here.